morning and welcome to Rose Red Homestead Micro Moment Monday, where today we're going to be starting a new series of videos on sprouting grains. I have sprouted grains for years and years and years. What I have not done is make them into sprouted grain flour, and ultimately that's what we will be doing. But first we need to learn just a little bit about sprouted grain. One of my funnest experience with sprouted grain happened without my even realizing what was going to happen. Years and years ago, probably 45 years ago, I lived with my first husband in Waco, and we had 4 of our 6 children at that point in time and lived in a neighborhood that was pretty spread out. There was an empty lot next to us that was sort of wooded, and then behind us was BLM land. Well, we were still struggling with learning how to do food storage and all of that, and we discovered a whole barrel of our wheat, which was about, I think it was a 100-pound barrel, was just filled with weevils. And so we just decided we were going to discard it. And so we took it out and just dumped it in that field that was right next to our house. And early one morning, my oldest daughter, who was about 5 at the time, came running to me, Mommy, come and see what's outside. And I looked outside and there was just a whole herd of deer. It was several days later. And that wheat had sprouted and grown grass about this tall. And there was, I think if I remember right, there were about 9 deer that were just crowded around that pile of wheat, munching away on that wheat grass and just having the time of their lives. They came back almost every day until the wheat quit producing grass, but it was really fun. But back in those days, I would use wheatgrass for some added nutrition in salads and things. I wasn't an avid sprouter, but nevertheless, I've sprouted grains for a long time. Now, what we are going to do today is learn a little bit about the nutrition differences between sprouted grain and non-sprouted grain. We have been on our YouTube channel it will be coming up in a couple of months on 5 years. And that whole time we have talked about storing grains for long-term storage. And they are wonderful. And I have mentioned about, and you can also sprout these. I've said that probably a dozen or more times in various videos, but we have never done it. So one of the things that happens when we sprout grains is that the nutrition of the grain increases. It's pretty incredible what actually happens. So let's just take a look at a kernel of wheat or grain or whatever. This is just a drawing I got from the internet. And when we sprout grains, we use all 3 parts of the kernel. We use the bran, the endosperm, and the germ. It is the germ right here that begins to sprout. And so if you give me just a minute, I'm going to draw a little root on that to kind of show you what happens. So I'm not an artist, but out of this little germ, a root begins to grow. And when it is about the same length as the kernel itself, that is when we want to stop the growth. Because anything after that, as I have learned in research that I have done in recent weeks getting ready for this little series that I want to do, that the optimum flavor and nutrition occurs right when that root is just about the same size as the kernel itself. Professional growers professional folks who sprout grain and then turn it into flour watch that root growth very carefully. Now, they have very tightly controlled environment for doing this, and we have our kitchens, but we can do a darn good job of sprouting wheat and then knowing what to do with it when it's done. And this series of videos is going to help ramp up our skills in doing that. We're going to end up with a couple of ways we can use those sprouts in making bread and other things as well. So let's talk nutrition for just a minute. As the grain begins to absorb water, it swells. And as the sprout begins to grow, it changes essentially the chemical composition of what's going on right here. Now, a couple of things happen when that happens. First of all, it reduces the gluten content of wheat by about 48%, almost half of the gluten content is is gone. And so that's going to affect our bread making, but that's down the road a little bit, and I'll show you how we deal with that when the time comes. Now, another thing that happens is that some enzymatic action on the inside there reduces the effect of the anti-nutrients. Now, anti-nutrients in different foods that lock nutrition in place, and they will not allow some of those micronutrients to be released to our human bodies for use. It just locks them up, and then we do whatever we're going to do with the grain, and those nutrients stay locked up until they leave our system, and we do not see the benefit. So the anti-nutrients are things like phytic acid, lectins, and protease inhibitors. They are concentrated in grains and in legumes. I have 3 examples here. I have white wheat and red wheat and rye, and then I have some lentils to represent the legumes, because we can sprout them as well. Now, by sprouting these grains and legumes, we can reduce the effect of those anti-nutrients by between 75 and 85%. And so it's not that it produces more of those things, it simply enables those micronutrients to be now available to our bodies. It does produce more protein, which is really a fun thing, which I hadn't really realized, and then allows up to 5 to 9% more protein, depending on what the grain or the legume is, as I have read. And then also it does produce more vitamin C. Now, the thing that we need to remember is, and it has been really popular about the past decade, a little bit longer, when sprouted grains have really come into their own. At first it was kind of considered a little bit strange, but as the years have gone by, more and more research has been done on that, and I looked at some of the research, and what they are now finding bears out the fact that the nutrition in sprouted grains really is better for us than with regular grains. And it's not that regular grains are bad for us, and it is certainly not a panacea for everything. I'm not going to convert everything over to only using sprouted grains. Some people do that, and that is certainly their choice. But to start adding some sprouted grain foods to our diet is really a good thing. It does increase the fiber content, and there are a lot of health advantages for that increased fiber in these grains as well. So some of the health benefits that can be had by doing sprouted grains and eating these sprouted grains are it can reduce blood sugar. It can take longer for us to digest, so it holds us longer with the nutrition so that we don't have to eat so often. It can also promote heart health, and it has been shown to be a factor in weight reduction for those of us who are working on that. So there are lots of really good things that occur when we can sprout these grains. So in the coming videos, we're actually going to get started. I'm going to show you how to get started on getting the sprouts going. We won't have completion on this until our next video, but we're going to start them today. Then we're going to come back in the next video, and I'm going to show you from that step to flour, to how we soak and then germinate, and then the things that we need to do to get from that point to flour or to the meal that we can use in bread baking. So that is what is coming up. So the first thing that we need to do, and there are lots and lots of ways that people sprout grains, and are some ways better than others, probably, but the best thing for each of us to do is to figure out what works well for us. Now, I have read and watched a lot in the past few weeks on sprouting grains, and I have a little bit of a concern with some of the ways that are there. So let me just tell you what my concerns are, and then in our next video I can show you how I address those concerns. It is important that we do not allow bacterial growth when sprouting. a number of years ago, Jim and I decided that we were going to grow microgreens commercially. And so we had the guy from the health department come out and check our facilities and everything else. And he was telling us that microgreens are far safer to grow than our sprouts, because sprouts have lots and lots of problems with bacterial contamination and mold and mildew. And so keeping that in mind as we move forward, I think that it's going to be fairly easy to be sure that we do not allow that to happen. Some of the methods that come after the step I'm going to show you right now are where the problem is. What I'm going to show you today is not a problem because it is the soaking stage. So I use white wheat for my baking bread. Sometimes I use the red wheat, but for right now I'm going to be sprouting this white wheat, white winter wheat. And I don't measure, I just pour a bunch in, about how much I think I'm going to need for a while. Now, ultimately that should make some nice flour for us. Once we've sprouted those grains and we have turned them into flour, then according to what everybody says, they need to be refrigerated. So I guess we'll do that. So I have some filtered water. I'm not going to rinse the grain at all. This is taken from my refrigerator where it's filtered. So it covers the grains. And then I just leave these out on, and I'm going to need a little bit more because they're going to swell. And that's all there is to it. We are now soaking those, and they will be ready to come to the germination stage by tomorrow. So we let them soak for 18 to 24 hours, and then in the next video, we'll take it from here. So today we've talked about the nutrition, and we have started the first step toward sprouting this grain, and that is the soaking part. So come back for our next video and we'll take it from here and go to flour. So we will see you then, and thanks so much for being with us for this Micro Moment Monday. We will see you again next week for another one.